This is Coda Radio, episode 250 for March 27th, 2017. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode's brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Scale Your Code. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week, sometimes lurking in your room, ninja style, why yes, it's Mr. Michael Dominic. Hello, Mike.
Wrong show.
Don't, careful. Be careful, your American was slipping. Don't want to, gotta maintain cover.
It's hard.
Gotta maintain cover.
I've been watching a lot of Tom Hartman.
Yeah, that's real gripping television, that RT, isn't it? The production quality is super top notch. This is what a typical RT set sounds like. It's just the worst. It's the worst production quality. When RT is labeled as the Russian government's propaganda arm for the world, I know that we are in no danger. We are in no danger.
Oh, come on, you gotta love it.
Do you even get it in your area? It's not on most people's TV line.
By the way, they don't have that problem on YouTube.
Oh, you're watching it on the YouTube, so you're getting tracked. You're gonna get tracked. You know, this is what causes AT&T to pull out, is because they showed AT&T ads next to RT. Man, you're part of the problem. You hear about this? How screwed Google is right now? That Johnson & Johnson, J.P. Morgan, AT&T, a lot of Starbucks, Walmart, they're all pulling out of Google advertising on YouTube. Because
I didn't think it was because of RT, though. I thought it was
just extremist videos. But you see, RT is an extremist propaganda operation, ergo. That doesn't filter. And maybe a little Coda Radio from time to time.
Well, you know what? Whoa.
What?
Huh? What was that comment?
We're gonna do a little propaganda busting later on in the show too. Some hard numbers. Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I'm also really looking forward to hearing about your new pipeline. You've been tweeting about this, but we haven't really talked about it on the show for like 3 weeks. I don't understand why, and so we're gonna right that wrong today. Mike's been laying some pipe.
Do you want to know why? It's because as soon as I got the information, I drove to the White House like Chase Nunez.
Yeah. No, it's not Chase. No. Damn it! No, don't do that. Have you seen his Twitter feed? @Nunes.
I haven't.
@Nunes. My buddy Chase, co-host of Unfilter, happens to have the same last name as Representative Nunes, and people just assume that Representative Nunes has the @Nunes Twitter handle, and so all day long, Chase is responding to people freaking the F out at the wrong person. They're adding him, and so he's just having a lot of fun with it, to a degree. I think it's starting to get on his nerves now because it's draining his phone battery. So yes, friends, yes, we'll be doing some of that today. We'll be a little propaganda busting. I'm looking forward to learning about your new pipe. But there was also a news story that kind of matters, and it could matter a lot for developers themselves down the road, especially open source developers. Totally didn't get a chance to talk about that recently. So we're going to do some make goods in this episode, plus a really cool tool towards the end that'll make you look like a pro if you're struggling, especially with your Bash script. You got problems with your Bash, boy? I feel bad for you. Oh man, that's a lot of B's. That was pretty good. All right, Mr. Dominic, are you ready to charge into the news this week? The hoopla as it was. I did not collect a lot of feedback because I'm still dealing with a lot of other. So my total feedback mechanisms are totally blown out. I apologize about that. But I did get some good hoopla this week, and I do have maybe a little admin we could take care of right here. Let me do a little paper shuffling here. Mike's going into rehab, so we're going to record a double for next week.
You know, you can only have so much Stoli with Putin before you have to stop.
No, I'm going down to Texas, and I'll be driving. I'll be on the road, driving like a madman. It's going to be part of the last push. I'll probably be driving for 11 hours Monday. So I will not be able to do Coda Radio. So we're going to record a double on this Thursday, coming up if you'd like to join us.
Now, is Mexico paying for your trip to Texas?
Well, not directly, but you see, through a tax on trade, eventually I'm going to make it up over a 10-year period. But initially, no, we'll be paying out of pocket.
Are you visiting Dell while you're down there?
Yeah,
perhaps?
that's the plan. Yep, I'm gonna go down there.
Boom.
I'm gonna go.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm gonna go down there and look at their XPS line of machines first of all, and of course all their other equipment. But I just I've been talking more and more to their people because there's a few fans of the network that work down there in their Linux area, and we've had a couple of their folks on our shows on Linux Unplugged. So basically, had a dialogue going, and I think they're getting serious about that whole like sysadmin, web dev, DevOps needs hardware, and MacBook isn't cutting it. They won't say it. But that's to me it seems like they got a fire in their belly about it. So I'm going down there to get the inside scoop.
The code name for that project is Sputnik, right?
Yes, comrade. Yes.
Yes, more Russian propaganda.
Oh yeah. Well, you see, the project is 7 years old, I think. So the problem is we really liked the Russians back then. See, early into the Obama administration, it's only been in the last 2 years that the left doesn't like Russians. Until then, it was the right that didn't like the Russians, and the left liked the Russians. You see, so we named a lot of things after the Russians, sort of tongue in cheek. But now, yeah, maybe the name doesn't age as well. I'm not sure.
What are you talking about? I have a little script I run that I call Vladimir Lenin.
Yeah, I actually kind of think it's a fun name, and it also is well fitting because it's sort of a skunkworks project that it was a skunkworks project inside of Dell, which has now grown to be pretty big. It's kind of fascinating.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so let's start with the thing that we probably should have talked about earlier. Gitter is joining GitLab. This is kind of a big story, and Gitter is going to essentially operate as a standalone network still, making all kinds of claims about how it's not going in anywhere, but with lots of hints about where it may be going long term. They say in the coming years, we want to work with the wider community to make Gitter a great help to run open source communities, which kind of sounds like maybe they're gunning for Slack territory right there when I hear that. We'll focus our attention in adding login with GitLab, GitLab backed with Gitter communities, and finishing the topics feature that is already released in our beta. Now this is so Gitter and GitLab. This acquisition kind of makes pretty a lot of sense. In fact, they say it's part of our strategic plan to become the most popular software as a service solution for public repositories. And then down here in the Q&A, they say, when do you plan to open source Gitter? Because this is a big part of the story. They're going to be open sourcing it. They say we expect to have this completed and to move the code over to GitLab no later than June 2017. Now, I was getting a lot of Slack vibes off this. And in their FAQ, they say, well, what about Mattermost? How is this going to be different? Because Mattermost is also sort of an open source collaboration communication tool. They say Mattermost is powerful and integrated messaging product for team collaboration. We'll continue to ship and recommend using Mattermost for internal team communication. And then they kind of crap on Slack a little bit. And then they promote the benefits of Gitter, which is public conversation history, completely unlimited, open, archived, indexed by Google and probably Bing. And they say it contributes to the public knowledge base of the internet. It's more in the open source tradition. And there's an article on InfoWorld by Sadar that speculates that, yeah, this is going to be the open source legitimate competitor to Slack. Because the real dirty secret of a lot of open source projects now, is they're using Slack to organize and plan a lot of aspects of the of whatever the project is.
So am I the only one who just like doesn't get Gitter?
Well, I think of it as sort of like a chat system around GitLab. So I don't know. I think it kind of makes sense. I guess I don't understand. I didn't understand it before this. Like, why would you stand this up just for like a project or something like that? But because that's not really how an internal team works. You already have an existing established place. You're communicating when you bring on new projects. You just continue in that, i.e., Slack. But you do need. But there is a real demand, I think, for something that is public, that is open, that's open to the web for open source projects.
Like, why not IRC?
Or why not a mailing list?
Well, because a mailing list is super inconvenient.
These
like
are the
IRC
same.
Just,
but these are the same questions people ask when they debate using Slack. Why not just use IRC?
No, there's an obvious use case for Slack. We need to get the salespeople, the customer service people, and the non-technical people in Slack, and IRC can be very not friendly to those sorts.
All right.
Well,
so take a medium to large size open source project. You got your community management folks. You got art people. You got PR people potentially. You got developers. You might even have some sort of board. There could be a lot of people. Like I know that, like, for example, the FreeBSD project currently relies very heavily on IRC channels for a lot of collaboration. And it's not just collaboration with just the core development team, although that's some of it. They also work with a lot of people that work around FreeBSD with the documentation and the art and stuff. So I could see something like that. You know, you take a project that's public on the web. Maybe it's even something like Rust, right? And this is a community around it that is sort of Slack-like. I don't know. I'm obviously just trying to picture it here. I actually think this is probably why it's a good acquisition, because I don't really see Gitter as a standout on its own.
Well, I don't think it's bad, right? I'm just I was surprised at how much feedback and how much kind of just general chatter there was about this. When to me it just looked like, okay, so GitLab bought a communications tool.
Mm-hmm. Everybody, you know what? Actually, I think what I'm missing to this story is how much it annoys me that everybody wants to be Slack. Microsoft wants to be Slack. GitLab wants to be Slack. Hangouts wants to be Slack now. Google Hangouts is turning into Slack. Everything's becoming Slack. You have one market hit, and now everybody tries to do that.
Well, this is, again, remember about 2 years ago, everybody wanted to be the Uber of, insert thing here.
Now everybody wants to be the Slack of. Maybe it's because they feel like bots, this is like the precursor to having a good bot ecosystem, and bots are going to be a big hit. Bots are the next. I don't know what it is, but it's funny because to me, when is this ever really truly successful? With a few exceptions, and there are some that I can think of, but with a few exceptions, when does it ever work where you have a market so dominant they become the Kleenex of a market? They become the TiVo of DVRs, the Kleenex of the market. They're Slack. When technology reaches this point, when does usually somebody else's technology come along and replace it? Generally, they don't until it's a totally different paradigm. But yet tech just has so much. These companies have so much money, dude. They have so much money that they can I
don't think GitLab has that much money, right?
Compared to you and I, they do. Compared to you and I, they do. I don't know. It's okay. All right, we can get off it. Yeah. There you go. Gitter has been bought by GitLab, and I think it's a great thing for Gitter and their team. I think it's probably going to be a good integration with projects that you have on GitHub or GitLab even. We shall see. All right.
Also, GitLab wanting to be the #1 destination for open source repos. That's going to be challenging.
You think?
GitHub still exists, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. GitHub's always going to be the champion, but I mean, if you remove that and just say, well, people looking for another solution besides GitHub, seems like it has a pretty good shot.
I don't know. I mean, this is a topic for a different day, but I'm seeing a lot of like, oh, if you want to get this contract, can you submit like you or the developer who's going to be working on the project's GitHub resume?
You are particularly excited about talking about your pipeline here. I can tell you are fired up about this.
I love it.
This is awesome.
Let's do it.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about it. So Mr. Dominic is not just in on Docker. He's all in with Docker and Rails and the entire pipeline. In fact, it's a Docker-powered Rails testing pipeline. Tell me about it.
So it runs on Bitbucket, hence my, taking a shot at GitLab, but not really. It basically, let's take 1,000 feet in the air here, right?
All right.
It will run your, in my case, RSpec Rails tests automatically when you merge or push a commit to a branch. That's not super impressive. The impressive part about this is that it's built in as part of Bitbucket, and you don't have to pay more for it, and you don't have to do a bunch of configuration. One of the largest things I see now when I go onto client sites, particularly people looking to move to Docker, perhaps at like a Doku continuous deployment solution, is that they're like, yeah, we sort of wish we did testing, but like I don't want to set up a Jenkins box. And I don't want to spend a lot of money because, Chris, you'll remember about 2 years ago, we had the CodeShip guys on.
Yeah.
They have a solution like this that is actually significantly more robust than pipelines. But what I'm loving about pipelines is you literally write one .yaml, YML file, and you are good to go. Git commit, git push, and it will run those tests. And you can integrate it with Slack and presumably Gitter, since we were just talking about it. And you can with HipChat because it's an Atlassian product. And it will actually like show, like we have a dev channel at Buccaneer, and will show you like, did the build fail? Did
So
it
that's
pass?
pretty cool. That's, we do that with some production stuff here in Slack. It drops in little notes, and I can just check in on that and see. And it's just automated stuff that I just check in on. So that you can, because it's, and the reason why I like it is not because it's hipster to have Slack integration, but because that's a space, that's a work area that I'm in already. And so I'm already checking that stuff. That's one of the reasons why I'm starting to put more into Telegram too. I'm already in Telegram. So if you put something in there, I am phenomenally more likely to see it. It's just versus something like showing up, like sending me an automated email. First of all, it'll probably get lost in a tab somewhere. And second of all, I'm probably only checking my email once a day now. And so putting it where I'm working or where my team is working is it's a huge plus. That's a really nice aspect that
Right.
I think is maybe an undersold for one of the integration things with Slack is it's sort of an undersold consideration.
Yeah. I mean, I got this up and running one evening in about 15 minutes. Now, before all the GitHub fans and GitLab fans jump on me, yes, both of them have a version of something like this. I'm not super familiar with GitLabs. GitHub, I see the problem here, Chris, is people are lazy. Can we just say that?
That's another reason why Slack is popular too, and things like this, because you can get it set up in minutes instead of having to stand up a server.
Well, exactly. That's what I want to get to. The standing up a server, like standing up a Jenkins server, budgets have never really been tighter, right? I mean, because as things have become more commoditized, there's more open source libraries. You can get a lot done with a lot less manpower now. People are really reluctant to say, yeah, sure, go spend a day spinning up a Jenkins server and do this custom workflow. And I've actually been in conversations with customers where that's the reason they're not doing testing, is that someone would have to like maintain a build server. So this takes that away. This basically says if you're running Bitbucket, that's it, right? You run it on pipelines. Pipelines is built into the repo. It runs the test. Right now, I'm doing it with RSpec and Ruby on Rails, but it runs a whole bunch of other kind of tests. I also think this would be pretty interesting for startups because, again, it's like no work to implement, right? Assuming you actually have some tests. If you have no tests, obviously you have to write tests. But yeah, I mean, I have a quick post on Buccaneer.io on how to do it. I think this is probably the direction that a lot of people are going to go in, if only because, it's just easier to get started with. It almost reminds me of hosted email, to make a really weird analogy, instead of having like an Exchange server. Because once you take that IT admin out of it, you're just in better shape.
That hurts a little bit, but I actually kind of understand what you mean, because it is less. It's like bringing in IT. It's a whole layer of work that you just don't even want to have time to like even conceptualize, let alone do. And so when you can just go click a few buttons and it's infrastructure on the pennies and everything connects up and the services you already use are set to go. It's hard to even, because here's the other thing about this. Actually, you know what? I have two thoughts about this, because two things jump out at me. First of all, it seems like it's pretty nice for you because it's something you're able to stand up pretty quick and get a pretty high amount of value for the amount of time you put into setting it up.
You have to do nothing, right? You have to write the YML file. It's already built in. My only complaint was it's a little slow. So when you do a merge request or a push, it can take several minutes for it to actually do the build.
The old argument against things like this was, well, you don't know how it's working. You couldn't build this yourself. You remember that? Like, you're using a magic setup here. How do you know how? You're just clicking buttons and everything's connecting for you. You couldn't rebuild this on your own. And I would argue that maybe that argument isn't really valid anymore. I have a couple ideas. Let's take a moment and talk about a way that you can also roll your own infrastructure. You can roll things up, stand things up, play with GitLab, things like that. Play around with Docker. Yes. Integrate Bitbucket with DigitalOcean. Yes, all of it's possible. DigitalOcean.com. Use our promo code CODERDigital. It's one word. You apply it after you create an account. You create the account with a really cool username. I don't know. Oh, wait, what's that? Oh. Well, then they first have to go get a cool email. Why do I care? Just go get a good email. I don't care. Put your email address in there, sign up. This guy over here. Put your email address in there, sign up, and then use our promo code CODERDigital. You apply that to your account, you get a $10 credit. You can play around with like the $5 a month rig for 2 months for free. Go build yourself some infrastructure, run it on a Linux box or a FreeBSD machine. All SSDs up and down. You can get started in less than 55 seconds with a very simple, intuitive, easy, and snappy interface. Data centers in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Toronto, Germany. Highly available block storage, which I love this because you can not only can you add additional storage as you need or remove that storage. Hello, ZFS. But you can also move it to other droplets. How about that? When you combine that with their simple-to-use interface, their straightforward pricing, really easy to understand. You're not going to be surprised. You're not going to get bit by like a CPU usage fee, which I have in the past on other providers. They have hourly pricing, so you can run up a really, really nice rig for here's one for 6 cents an hour. Say you want to try out like a crazy project. You know what? You don't even need that rig though, really. I can't try to think of a project you'd want. 3 cents an hour, you get 2 gigs of RAM, a 2-core processor, a 40 gigabyte SSD, and a 3 terabyte transfer. A 3 terabyte transfer with a 2-core. You guys, a 2-core processor. That's a really great deal. You combine that with the fact that they have this API that honestly, they should open up an API school. Look at this. This is it's kind of cut off on my screen, but this is the documentation for their API. It's so good, guys. We have a bunch of really easy to use tools built around it ourselves. Come on. If we can do it, you could definitely do it. I think one of the coolest pro products they offer in their whole lineup, because I could just go on and on, but I'll just wrap it up with this. They offer this load balancer system. You can improve, not only do you improve performance, but it's great for the setup factor. We were just talking about this is something that people have spent careers building. And now it's just integrated into the DigitalOcean service and into the dashboard. It's a check a box kind of thing. You can do HTTP, HTTPS, TLS. It's a really pro setup, and you can be boom, all over the world. Your content's immediately available, scaled to traffic of any size, itty bitty or huge. It's so pro. That's many things you can take advantage of. There's a lot, but I'm just going to mention that one today. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code CoderDigital, and a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this here Coder Radio program. So I guess let's start with the elephant in the room. You and I have been critical of Docker recently, but you are so all in on Docker with this setup. You're basically married to Docker in this setup. Do you have any reservations about that?
No, I've actually basically been standardizing on Docker for a lot of things.
A lot of people have.
My criticism is from a place of love.
Docker's won when FreeNAS has switched over to Docker to do plugins. Like the BSD file server is now using Docker. Yeah. Windows is running Docker. Docker's won that layer of containerization where you want to deliver products and you want to this kind of stuff. You want to do in between services type stuff. I think Docker's won. There's lots of great containers for different use cases, but for this, I think Docker's won. All right, so that's just a Docker elephant.
And for disaster recovery scenarios, just dealing with Docker containers can be a lot more efficient and easier to set up.
So if this was, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
If this was something that you were doing, I want to touch on this for a moment because I think it sort of underscores why you find this to be exciting. Back in my day when I was still a sysadmin, to set something up because I set up things sort of like this, it was a series of bash scripts that used SCP and rsync, FTP, SVN, and an HTTP server, and then a production and a test system. And I had to build this entire system, and it took me about 4 or 5 days to get it all right, and then it took us about 2 weeks of tweaking and refining. Oh, okay, I do need a little web interface so I can push a button and little things like that. And so it'd be, in total, it's probably a 2.5, 3 week process to get a system that the developers could use to do something like this. And that's, to do that, it requires to have a server admin, and in this case, also there was a server manager, and it requires having essentially the capacity to have a 3 week lead before you can have a tool. And now you do it in minutes. So do you have any reflection on that? Do you worry about the fact that this could become a core function of your workflow and you don't have any real control or oversight over it?
So, yeah, I mean, there is like a matrix in my mind of like advantages and disadvantages of pipelines, right? And actually, one other thing I'd like to just mention quickly is one of the biggest advantages, other than the speed of setup, is many enterprises are already bought into the Atlassian toolchain, right? Bitbucket is part of, and getting them to use an outside service is basically like pulling teeth. That it is hard if you've never done work in the enterprise, which Chris, I know you have. It is hard to really exaggerate like how, you know, how can I say this? Like preferred vendors, right?
It's part of it is also like once a brand in the enterprise space becomes trusted as business friendly to them, it is there has to be quite literally a business prerogative to switch to something else. Like there has to be a way to demonstrate an advantage to the business to use something, even something as simple as a tool.
Yeah, I mean it's that is a huge advantage, right? Because a lot of enterprises are running versions of Atlassian or they're running on the Atlassian cloud, and that means they already have this.
Also, if you say things like Bitbucket and Docker, they've actually heard those words before.
They've heard those words. The disadvantage that you bring up of the lock-in is true, but I don't think it's funny that you went right to I would spin up a server and like use rsync and do all this stuff. I would never do that anyway.
Right. I wouldn't do it today, I don't think. But that's how you would have done it back in the day. Then,
right. I mean, the alternative to this is CodeShip in my mind. I mean, those are the two that I'm
there is a couple of other, like, you string them together a little more to yourself. It's not quite as much of like push a button, but I do know there's there's a couple of open source projects that I've talked to that are using essentially like they use DigitalOcean. Whenever something new gets posted on GitHub, they build it on. They have a system that builds it, and
Well, DO, you can spin up a Jenkins box, right?
Yeah, you can do that too.
One-click images. So there are like gradients of self-service and magic here. We've talked about testing a lot, and I'm just starting to really buy into it, but not to the point where I want to maintain like 5 droplets to do it.
Yep.
I much rather, I already pay for Atlassian, so having it on Bitbucket makes sense. And in cases where I want like a more robust continuous integration solution with, automatic deployments, things like that, CodeShip I found a very useful tool. And they've been around for a while now. I mean, I don't know how long we had them on the show, but they've actually grown with something, a product of theirs called the Docker CLI, which is kind of their branded thing. But basically they have a Docker, just like pipelines. It is Docker powered. It understands Docker containers, and your entire deployment, continuous integration, CI in quotes, DevOps in quotes, workflow is Docker, which again, standardization, that makes my life 400 times easier.
Yeah.
And if the client ever wants to fire me, well, they just have to find somebody else who knows Docker. Right?
Yeah.
They don't have to it's not my crazy custom scripts.
And the reverse is true too. If you come in and it's taking off, and you've invested your time in Docker, there's a much higher likelihood that skill set's going to be applicable to a client. I mean, you're going to come into a client that's way more likely to be using Docker, and your skill set will be a better match than if you would. Yeah, I grok. So, and here's the other thing I was going to ask you about lock-in, though. Going back to the core question is, because there's these gradients of do-it-yourself and there's actual almost direct competitors, it feels like the lock-in issue is not as much as an issue as it used to be to me. Because you could actually wholesale roll this yourself if you had to. The only real issues you have in this is Bitbucket shuts your account down, or GitHub shuts your account down, or something like that. Right? There could be like an account issue, but for the most part, these companies are pretty established now too. They're not nearly as fly by night as they were 4 or 5 years ago or even 2 years ago when people were really debating this. So I feel like the lock-in issue is not as pronounced anymore either, and the magic issue is not quite as pronounced because you can go find your gradient that works best for you. It's like we've settled on this whole range of solutions, all the way from the fully automated to the completely custom roll it yourself. And I find that to be fascinating looking back at it, because it just sort of naturally all clicked into place while we were all debating how it was going to shake out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's weird how all of these solutions are basically Docker powered too, right? I mean, I talked about you have to write one YML file. Well, guess what? That is like running Docker commands. The interface that you're coding against here is really Docker in terms of the deployment. Obviously, your Rails app or your Node app is whatever it is. And I almost think that you're focusing on an open source,
the platform.
I want to be a little. little careful about saying community because Docker Inc. does exist, right? And they do
Right.
things. But right, this shared platform, as long as you're not going deep into the proprietary configuration stuff in any of these platforms, you should be reasonably portable, if not totally portable, between them. I mean, even Amazon now has Docker power. Like Docker is a first-class citizen. You just load up your Docker container, and they will try to run it on some version of EC2.
Yeah, it's sort of akin to file formats. You could be using Excel and I could be using LibreOffice, but as long as we're using an open file format, we can still exchange it. In a sense, it's sort of like Docker is the piece you're moving around. The container is what you're moving around, and you can go a layer below that. What's really the platform in all of this? It's Linux. It's CNAMEs. It's Linux.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the hardest challenge, well, not the hardest, but one surprising challenge I very recently had was getting this all running on an older version of RHEL.
I'm sorry about that.
You should be.
Yeah, that's rough, man.
Yeah. But even then, it was like, you just have to do it, right? You just have to figure it out.
Whew.
And Red Hat themselves are actually totally embracing Docker too.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh boy,
They're
sure are.
Taking a little longer.
I think they're one of the reasons why Docker 1.0 shipped before it should have. All right. Well, Mr. Dominic, back in my day, we didn't have containers.
You know what, Chris? There are villains, but there are also heroes.
That's true, and with great responsibility comes great power. Wait, what? Do you want to do a couple of really quick headlines, or do you have any more on your new pipeline? Which I did.
Let's do the story that Colonel Linux shared, the how to prevent coding heroes from destroying the team.
Oh, interesting.
Did you not see my good segue there?
So coding heroes. Now, what defines a coding hero?
So guy who basically saves the servers when they're on fire, stays up all night, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. So you mean like the guy that goes above and beyond to save the team?
Yes.
The guy that does all the work. Because, let's be honest. Okay, hold on. Man. Let's get into this.
Right.
Because here's the thing, Mr. Dominic. Let's be honest about teams. How many times you've been in a team? Not all of them. I've been in some great teams. How many times you've been in a team where it's a group of people and 75 to 85% of them are not doing the work. There's a small majority that ends up doing all of the work. That's a very frequent thing. So is that a coding hero or is that somebody just getting the job done? I ask you.
Wow, no, that is an interesting take on this article.
I haven't read it yet, but you get me fired up.
Nice.
You got me fired up with your introduction. Yeah.
So your assumption is that we're back in middle school.
Wow.
We've ended a horrible team project.
Yikes.
And the kid with the glasses is going to do the whole thing, huh?
Well, to a degree, that does seem to be what happens even in the what we like to call adult world. That does seem to happen.
Now, so I think
I'm not always saying it's one person. It's usually a couple of people.
Oh, no. So, okay. So, Thangir Brock, I'm sorry I butchered your name. His point here is that the heroes who are doing these late night, save the server, sleep at the server, kind of like startup hero stuff, are actually doing damage because all they're doing is, it reminds me of the little Dutch boy, right? They're putting their finger in the dike and it's great for now, but
there's
it's eventually going to fall.
There's also, the points that the article make that do resonate with me is they say this one. They can be the only ones to know about specifics of something, providing information for those who seek it, but they don't have the habit of sharing that information, which increases their truck factor. I do completely agree, and I have often accidentally become that person.
I'm conflicted on this, right? I don't think that saving the servers when the shit's going down is a bad thing. I actually want to defend the heroes a little bit because sometimes you just need to quick and dirty get things done, especially in a crisis. I would actually blame the managers who got you to the crisis, right? The sales manager who oversold a timeline, right? That wasn't really hittable. Let's just blame sales guys. The sales guy who underbid a contract, right? The startup CEO who burned through too much money too fast and you have to get this out to get your next round of funding. The IT manager who somehow is managing developers and doesn't understand how long things take.
Yeah.
And doesn't want to invest in existing systems, right? That all seems bad. I mean, I'm currently doing an update project, updating apps from Rails 2 to 5. It's horrible.
Mr. Dominic, We are all a product of our environment.
Oh, here we go.
Sometimes you know, the guy staying up late at night or the girl staying up late at night, the gal. They may not be the hero that we want, but they're the hero we need.
So sort of like Donald Trump.
Oh, okay. I don't have a response to that. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm kind of conflicted on this issue. I feel like this is one of those topics I could reflect on for a bit and save more. This says basically if they're the person they're saving the day, there's the reason why they have the title heroes. And despite first impressions, it may not be a good thing to have that title because fixing the surface of a burning problem temporarily is the same thing as fixing its root cause.
See, all right, I think we should open this to the listeners and let them reply back for Thursday's show.
Okay.
But I would argue
that means they got to get on the horn quick.
The hero's not really to blame, right? What we're really talking about here is a Gotham City-like situation where the managers, i.e., you know, the mayor or whatever, have let things get so crappy and neglected basic infrastructure and basic maintenance that you need a hero, and the hero has to be kind of rough and crazy, or, you know, in coding terms, basically a cowboy.
Can I fork where you're going for a second? I want to fork your idea because not only do I agree with what you've said so far, but I want to contribute back that to me, when I read this article, the more I read it, what it sounds like is one of these PMOs or one of these staff people that you've seen somewhere at a business you've worked at where they essentially just look at their Outlook calendar all day. And then they go to their next meeting, then they come back and they sit down and they look at Outlook. And they spend their entire day in Outlook, and then when they're not in Outlook, they go to a meeting. And they just add to the churn of the bureaucracy that slows all progress down. And the people that actually end up having to get that thing shipped get labeled as the person who works long hours nonstop so that way they can be the best. Or in this case, they say, I love this one, they try to avoid meetings that don't have a direct impact on the project like retrospectives. They believe those meetings are useless and a waste of time. They might think the job of a developer is mostly to write code and not to care about meetings unrelated to programming, even though retrospectives are useful and foster continuous improvement. See, there's bias in that. There's an assumption about that person's thoughts and what motivates them.
Right.
And then there's a bias explanation of why retrospectives are good. Now, what if what you really have is a bureaucratic layer of a company that just sits around and has meetings to self-sustain itself and doesn't really contribute any actual value to the process? I would also try to avoid that and try to get my work done. But then I would be labeled as somebody who avoids meetings.
Let me take it even further, though I will say that retrospectives can be helpful. What if you have an IT management bureaucracy who are so risk averse and so ignorant of good development maintenance that they do things like don't update their development platform for 5 years, and then something happens and there's a fire and there's a tremendous amount of pressure on either an outside vendor or their internal development team to just get it done. The development team does what it was asked to do, takes on a ton of technical debt, and then is told to stand down, or the outside vendor is not given another work order or another whatever you want to call it. It also to actually clean it up, add tests, add things that actually go to overall quality.
Yeah. I think it also
that is the most common scenario I see lead to this.
I agree, and I want to get up. We're saying we are punting this to the audience to give us your thoughts. I'll conclude with this because this to me also feels like a way to self-rationalize loyalty to explain why you don't like this person. They says here they tend to stay with the same company for a long time because they might not have enough general skills to try opportunities, just domain-specific knowledge they acquired in the company.
See, again, this is so funny because coming at it from the contracting perspective, what I often get the call for is, oh my God, we didn't update, Java in 4 years or something. Come help us do that. Okay, well, we can do this in the next, we can do this in 100 hours, but then we're going to need another 50 to do these quality of life, these best practice things to keep you in good shape. What happens? You do the minimal upgrade, and then like, you know what? We're going through some budgetary issues, so we're going to hold off on those, nice to haves.
So what I would like to hear from is anybody who's worked either in the situation where they can see from Mike and I's perspective, or if you've worked in a situation where you have a good team flow and this kind of behavior does sideline things. I kind of feel like there's somebody out there who's like worked in a team that's just jamming so well. They're just jamming, Mike, that they don't they don't have an issue. Real quick, just FYI, we don't probably really have much discussion. Heads up that the lottery to maybe potentially, if you're lucky, go to Worldwide Developers Conference has kicked off. Tickets are $1,600, and you may or may not get to go. San Jose, California, June 5th through the 9th. Although, I would say maybe if you think you might want to go, plan the trip anyways, because there's going to be a lot of S going around in town. Apple's putting some money down to actually make that happen. So there's going to be people getting money to do events around San Jose in general. So that's kind of cool. So a little FYI on that if you want to go to WWDC. Any inclination from you, Mr. Dominic, to go now that you got that new MacBook?
No, I do not think I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Probably coming to your MacBook soon, too. Another heads up, just really quick. iOS 10.3 is out with APFS. So HFS gets upgraded, I guess is the term to use, gets converted to HPFS, from HPFS Plus to APFS. So back your ass up first.
For the Apple files.
Do you want to save the follow-up on the MacBook for the Thursday show?
I think we should save the follow-up on the MacBook for the Thursday show.
I have two more things for you before we run. That I just want to, I kind of thought this was, because one of them is very applicable, and then one of them is a tool. So we have a couple of things in the show notes that I think I'm going to try to cut out, and we'll bump them to Thursday. Because I got a couple things. And I think one of them might be more surprising than you expect, Mr. Dominic. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, a little tease for yourself. There. So before we get to our tool of the week and something that's, I don't know, pretty applicable to some of the things we've talked about on the show, I want to mention Scale Your Code. We're about to talk about Stack Exchange and Stack Overflow, and these are huge websites now. Services and sites like this, like the ones we were just talking about, just massive sites. If you want to learn from folks that built those sites, the communities, the tools behind them, and the software, go to scaleyourcode.com. You can learn from successful developers and get access to interviews, tutorials, and blog posts. It might be really useful if you're trying to build something. You just subscribe with your email address. It's a mailing list. You get 2 or 3 emails a month. It's not like you're getting a bunch of junk or something. And of course, you can unsubscribe anytime. You get interviews with experts that give you real information, stuff that's like hard-learned lessons. See how they run their platforms. Resources that surround you with these experts too are really nice. They get great posts on that stuff. Like I was just, speaking of Stack Exchange, I was just remembering that Nick Craver over here has a post. Now, Nick is a software developer and system administrator for Stack Exchange. He says he keeps pretty busy over at Stack Overflow, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And the rest of, between that and the software stack for that and keeping the network running, he stays pretty busy. He also does a little database work in there. He does it all, really. He also does a little of their data center stuff and does some of their debugging stuff. It's a fascinating interview. Check it out at scaleyourcode.com. Lots of great interviews. Learn from renowned engineering cultures. Learn how they run their tools in production, the mistakes they've made. Software engineers and system administrators as well. Scaleyourcode.com. Just go to scaleyourcode.com right there. There's no slash. Just go to scaleyourcode.com and sign up for their mailing list, free mailing list, low-flow mailing list where you get access to the interviews and posts at scaleyourcode.com. Thanks to Scale Your Code for sponsoring the Code Radio program. So, speaking of El Stacko, I thought this was really interesting. They had they gave us some stats. 40 million people visit Stack Overflow to learn, share, and level up. They estimate 16.8 million of these people are professional developers and university students. They got a great map. Now get ready to have your mind blown. You ready for this? About 3/4 of respondents in this survey identified as web developers. They also are interested in building desktop apps, but 72% web developers, then 28% for desktop apps. Full stack web developer was how 63.7% of folks identified themselves. The United States has a higher proportion of people who identify as a full stack web developer. Germany has a comparatively lower proportion. As for mobile developers, the U.S. and United Kingdom have proportionally more iOS developers and fewer Android developers than the rest of the world. Not surprising. Because India and China. This is also sort of one thing that I took away from this. A lot of developers have been only in it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
It starts to trail off, and then a huge jump again at 20 or more years. There's our dark matter devs. And also, look, in this range in here, these are the dark matter devs, too. It's pretty fascinating. But that's not what I took away. They say web and mobile developers have significantly less professional coding experience. Burn. Actually, it's true, though. On average, the developers in other technical disciplines, such as system administrators and embedded programming, have more experience. Thought that was interesting for you. Pass that.
Yeah, it
along.
is interesting. I mean, there's a couple of things here, right? So one, JavaScript is just, ripping the shit out of the world.
Yeah, but Rust is getting a lot of love, and Swift has fallen to position number 4 on the love list.
Why are you saying things that hurt me?
I'm telling you, maybe you should get all in on Rust. That's all.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Swift.
No, Swift has fallen down the popularity list by 4 positions.
And I think that makes sense, right? Because
it's not as new. The newness is wearing off. The representative newness.
I think we're seeing a wide trend of like boot camps and, Rutgers University, which is a publicly funded college in New Jersey, a really famous one, right? Actually has their own like certificate program now that's like a pseudo government subsidized boot camp to retrain people as JavaScript developers.
So the boot camp thing is interesting because they did a survey on boot camps, and 45.8% of those surveyed said they'd already done a boot camp after they were a developer. Like they didn't become a developer through a boot camp. They said it's more like they go in there to like change or significantly upgrade a skill set and become more relevant in a new job market. But less than a month, only 6%. Only 6% to the boot camp thing. It's 4 to 6 months, 4%. I already had a job as a developer when I started the program, 45.8%.
And I bet you there's some number of dark matter developers using these boot camps to transition over to something.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, is that's a big part of it. Or it's like, well, now we got to move to this new stack. Windows is the most commonly used platform. Linux desktop number 2, dude.
Boom.
Yeah. That seems like I don't know. That's a mind bender right there. Yeah, Rust is the most loved. I thought that was fascinating. And then there's something in here about most loved and dreaded platforms.
Yeah, what was the most dreaded? I didn't actually get that to that part.
Dreaded platform is SharePoint. The most dreaded platform is SharePoint.
Of course it is. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't even think that would register on the.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting. Also, then Salesforce, then WordPress, then Windows Phone, then mainframes. People would rather develop for mainframes than Windows Phone. Then the Windows Desktop, then Arduino, then Android. And then you know what? So the most loved platform is Linux, and the least dreaded platform is also Linux.
Yeah.
So there you go. Linux is still rocking it hard. And of course, when you're talking like we were earlier, Docker and stuff like that, man, look at JavaScript though. Holy crap.
I'm wondering if we can like extrapolate out of this and say that the trend is going towards web technologies. I mean, is this just confirming things we've been talking about for a few months now, right?
Yeah. Although interesting that Visual Studio is so disliked, but at the same time, it's also one of the most heavily used tools. That's a weird dynamic. Is that a work thing, you think?
I think it's a work thing. I was going to say, I think if we were to section off the dark matter devs and just find out like what percentage of them are living in VS, I bet you it's extremely high.
Yeah. It kind of would seem to be just by looking at those results. Huh. Ooh, that's got to be rough. You hate the tool the most, but then that's the number one used tool. That's a tough situation.
Well, and there's probably, I mean, to be fair, there's probably a correlation between like time you spend in the tool and how much you hate it, right?
Yes. Yeah, because every tool you use a lot, you end up hating. They all suck.
Because you end up hitting the issues with it much faster.
It's true for all professions. It's true for all tools. It's so true. Well, okay, Mr. Dominic. Well, before we run, shellcheck.net. You can. It's also available, I think, on a lot of distros repos. It's a GPL shell checker. You just basically find bugs in your shell script with it, and that's kind of it. It's kind of neat. It's if you're curious, since it is open source and you want to see a Haskell project, well, it's a Haskell project you can go check out. So I've linked to a embedded version that's on the web, but you could also just install it on your local machine. And shell check for all. You know what? Because I thought we talk about all this other stuff. Let's get real. Where it's really just at the end of the day, even some of the fanciest programs get started with a bash script. So we all need
I actually wake up every morning with a bash script.
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah, right next to one. Just wake it right up. Maybe have a little bash script in the morning, like a wake and bash. That's what you do. Is you wake and bash. You know?
And at night I wind down with a bash martini.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, listen, we're going to get out of here, but we'll be back pretty soon. Sooner than usual. We'll be back here on Thursday this week to record while I'm driving down to Texas. So we'd love to get your feedback a little bit earlier if we can. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact, or even better, coderradio.reddit.com. Go there, give us your feedback. That's kind of quick for me to incorporate in the show this week. Mr. Dominic, I'm giving you a heads up. Do you want to point anybody to go anywhere online this week?
Yeah, go to buccaneer.io and you can find my YouTube channel where I have lots of guides on all the stalker stuff.
Oh, nice. Also, I'll plug mine. I'm going to be vlogging the trip to Texas, youtube.com/Chris Fisher. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you right back here on Thursday, which will probably be released on Monday. So see you next Monday. I'm going to go with that, Monday.